Hi, Sean McFetch is back here, and this is the second of our series of videos on producing a stock coding application. In the first video, we just started the customization process of our user experience and making slight changes to what came out of the box with the phone template. And we ended up with, thus far, a user experience that looks like this, and just lets us enter a symbol and hit the add button. The key is that this add button now is firing into the view model, and we're using commanding through MVVM Lite to accomplish this. But this is now we want to move on to add the rest of our user experience, and this is what we want to look like, where each row here is being bound, of course, to a quote that we retrieved from Yahoo, and we're using data binding to populate the symbol and the stock trade last time and value, and an indicator showing whether it has gone up or down since the last tick. And then if we hit the plus sign, we're going to show more details on that stock, and this is driven through in animation, and if we hit the minus sign, we just hide that again. So that's our target, and we're just going to show you how this works. First of all, just a little review here on this, on how these parts go together. We're going to be working with a data template and for the list view, and here we're going to have the rows in our list box are going to be tied to the objects in our quote list, and of course these objects all represent the symbols that we retrieved from Yahoo, and we have the symbol, the time, the trade, and these are properties that are going to be tied to our XAML, and the XAML describes what these rows will look like. So there is a one-to-one correspondence between the objects in our quote list and the rows, and it's this data template that is going to describe the row appearance. Now we'll begin to make some more changes to our XAML. The first thing we want to work on is this main list box, and this is the list box that contains the view of our quotes, and it's being these quotes, of course, part of the quotes list that are bound to this list box, and each quote becomes a row in my list box. Out of the box, they're going to provide this item template with its associated data template, but of course it's not the look and feel we want. So what I'm going to do first of all is to add my new data template. I'm going to define as a static resource. I just prefer having my templates as a resource, just a matter of style. And resources can be contained in multiple places in a project, in the app.xaml, or as a resource dictionary. In this case, I'm just going to put it inline reading this file. But now we will notice that there's an error here because the item template is set more than once. So we just have to remove this so the compiler is happy. Now we're going to go up and we're going to define that template, and we're going to add a new resource section to our project, and just phone, and then the phone application page, and this is going to be a resource section we're defining, and in here we are going to put our data template. So now we're going to add our quote template as a resource, and so we go into our resource section, and we add our definition, start our definition. We have to close this off, make the compiler happy, and we just set up a data template that, and with the name of the quote template so that we can refer to it. Now remember that each one of these rows in our list box, and this is a visualization of the run application, we're actually going to describe with two grids. One grid is initially going to be visible, and it's going to contain our symbol, our trade, and our time and the amount. And then the The second grid initially is going to be set to invisible by having its height of 0. And we hit the plus button, we just increase that height so we can see the information. So this is what we want our XAML to be able to describe. And the first thing we do is we need a stack panel, because we're going to have two grids, one on top of each other. And so the stack panel is ideal for doing this. And we're just going to again close it off. And this is the name, we give it a name because we're going to need this later. And of course it's a vertical orientation, so they're on top of each other. And now we're going to need two grids. And the first of these grids is this is going to be our visible grid, which is always going to be visible. And we're going to, again, we're going to have to close this guy off. And we just have to correct this. And then we're going to add the second one, which is our invisible. Because it's invisible because we don't have a height. The height is set to 0. And we just again close this off. And we'll just review our XAML to make sure we're okay. Yes, we've got a stack panel and we have two grids. One which is visible and the other which has a height of 0, so it's not going to show up. So now we will define the XAML that will produce the desired look for a quote object, as it is bound to each row of the list box. We start with the first grid that is always visible and contains the key properties of the quote, that is our symbol, the trade time, and the value. We first divide the row into columns with this XAML. This just adds some column definitions of varying width. There are multiple ways of dividing up the row. If I had to use blend, I would have ended up with margins. However, I have a preference to using columns. We then add the XAML that will add our text blocks. Each block represents a property in the quote that is associated through binding. E.g., in column 0, the quote property will be bound to the text property of the text block. Also, we'd like to point out here that we're using a converter here as we are binding our time. What this is doing, it's allowing us to change the value of the source property is going to be changed as it is being bound to its target. In this case, the datetime object is being changed to a short datetime string, so we have a shortened output string. So now we're going to define our date converter class. I've already added this folder called converters to my project. So I go in, right click, add new class, and I'm going to call this a date converter. Now this date converter is a value converter, so we want to extend iValue converter. And if we right click here, we can our using is going to be from windows.data. The interface we can just right click on and we hit the implement interface, and it's going to define the skeleton of the interface and the two methods that we need, the convert and convert back. And now we're just going to add the implementation of this method, our convert method, and it's going to just take and convert the input datetime object. It's just going to be converted into this short time string, so we don't take up so much space on the output row. Now, how do we use this? We have to now go back to our main page XAML, and we need a key here, and we're going to add a resource key, and I'm just going to paste this. And what we're doing here is this key is just how our local XAML can refer to this date converter class, but of course it's not defined now, so we have to bring in the namespace. and we go up here and we define what local is, and Visual Studio will show us the list of namespaces it knows about. We just go down and pick the quote app.converters. And now that it's now resolved and the XAML's happy. And again, if we go down now and we look at the definition of the converter, we've then satisfied all the requirements because our XAML now knows what toShortTime is. As you can see on the left here in our designer view, we always have an idea of what our user experience will look like, even at this stage. We don't even have to run the application. This is great for our designers. Now we continue the defining of the user experience by adding a XAML for the arrows that will show the direction of the stock from the last trade, either up or down. Let's hope up. These were drawn in Blend, which produces a path which is a series of move to and line tos as output. And these are vectors because everything in Blend is scalable vector graphics. And I added my path to the XAML as a string resource so I could easily reuse this in other projects. So now we're going to bring in the XAML that's going to make use of these strings that contain our vectors. And we just included this right here, and it's a definition for column 3. And immediately it appears as if we have a double definition here because both of these guys are living in column 3. But there is a converter that lives on these guys that is going to resolve this, which we should soon see. But notice also that we're making use of these strings right here by setting the data that is equal to our up or down arrow static resources. So now we have to define these converters. As we did for the date converter, we're going to add the down direction converter and the up direction converter. Just save some time. these have already been created. And again, they're going to extend iValue converter. And as such, they're going to have a convert and a convert back method. And in the case of the down direction, we're going to take a look at the direction property, which is set in our quote object. And dependent upon its value, we're going to set the visibility to either visible or collapse right here. So right here in our column 3 grid for the down arrow, when we look at our visibility, the source is the direction property of our quote, but we're applying this converter that we just described. And if we take a quick look in our quote object, we'll see what the direction is all about, because in our trade setter, we're actually in here, depending upon the last trade that we saved, we're going to set just a Boolean being true or false. So the stock went up or down, then we'll return true or false. Now, if we go back and look at our XAML, we'll see these are still not resolved, of course, because we have to go in and we have to add the keys, the same way we did for our date time. And we add the up and the down direction converters, and now our XAML should be happy because everything is resolved. So now we have the XAML for our More button, which is going to let us show more or less information on the stock. And it's going to have a click handler, which is defined by the More button _ click. Notice I'm going to add this to the code behind in this case. I don't have a problem doing this because this is strictly UI code and there's no business logic. The grid, which is going to show that more information, actually has a height of 0, and that's why it initially doesn't show up. And then we take and we divide it into rows and columns, and then we simply set the text blocks, which are going to live in these rows and columns, to additional properties in our quote object. So then, after defining the XAML, we have to go in and we have to define that More button click handler. And this will end up driving an animation that will show this hidden information that is in that More grid. The handler, though, is only past the button itself. and we need to traverse the visual tree to find the more grid that we defined in our data template. The visual tree is a tree of renderable objects that is produced from the XAML. And if we look at the XAML itself, we will see that the quote container is the parent of both the button and of this more grid. And it's the key to being able to find this more grid. So what we do, we're going to call get parent to get access to the quote container from our button, and use find visual child by name to get the more grid, which now we can feed into our animations. So let's use a debugger to just clarify how this code works. I just set a breakpoint in our click handler, and we're going to just hit the plus button, so we run into this click handler, and we'll see that the input here is a button, and then we're going to run up the visual tree from this button to find the quote container, which is the parent for that button and also is the parent for our more grid. So now, after finding our container, now is that stack panel that is the quote container, and we're able to then go down and go through the children of the quote container to find the more grid. Now, and indeed here, if we look in here, we've got a grid and its height is 0. So we've achieved our goal, and we use this to run the animations that are either going to show more or less information. And if we go back to our XAML, we can just see what these storyboards look like. The up storyboard is just going to vary the height from 0 to 90, and the close is just going to do the reverse. It's going to go from 90 to 0. We also had to add additional code here into the storyboard complete handler, and it's just going to save the height, so the next time we know what direction to move.